Hey guys, tonight we tiptoe through powdered halls and into the lavender-scented world of 18th century Parisian wig stylists. The chandeliers don't flicker so much as tremble with the weight of their own extravagance, while pomade simmers on, glow heat in a copper pot, threatening to curdle. You're walking into a cramped atelier, tucked between a patisserie and a scandalous bookshop. It smells like beeswax, burnt feathers, and the faintly sour tang of ambition. And just behind the curtain, a woman named Solange sharpens a long ivory comb and adjusts her apron because 5 clients will arrive before noon, and not one of them will be reasonable. Tonight's journey isn't just about hair. It's about hierarchy, secrets, social masks, and exactly how many birds can be perched in a hairstyle before it becomes a hazard. You're going to learn more about sheep fat than you'd ever want to. And you probably won't survive this if you've got a sensitive nose. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is where you are now. Dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. It's early morning in Paris. The cobblestones are still slick from last night's drizzle, and a few wooden carts trundle down the alley with their wheels squeaking in slow rhythm. You duck beneath a crooked sign, Maison de Perruques EST 1712. Inside, the workshop is already awake. Solange, the chief stylist, stands over a clay pot of melted pomadiqual parts, sheep tallow, beeswax, and oil of rosemary, stirring it with a spoon that once belonged to her grandmother. No one uses it to eat anymore. Wigs don't style themselves. Before any curls are set or powders puffed, there's prep work, lots of it. You glance around. On one side, bundles of raw human hair hang from pegs, labeled by origin blonde. From Brittany, brown, possibly Corsican, and a vague, unknown, but lush. Across the room, a line of mannequin heads sits like condemned prisoners, each bald, slightly cracked, and awaiting transformation. You're here to shadow Solange today. She's been doing this for over 20 years and can identify a duke's rank just by the shape of his hairline. She flicks her wrist, testing the texture of the pomade. Not too soft, not too hard, like the perfect lover, she mutters. You nod sagely, even if you're not sure what that means. The shop's apprentice, Etienne, is already sweeping the floor with what looks suspiciously like a wig on a stick. It probably is. He's 17, clumsy, and dreams of moving to Versailles one date to work with the real hair elites. For now, though, he's stuck brushing crumbs out of musty curls and fetching powder cones from the cupboard. You watch. Solange lay out her tools like a surgeon before an operation. There are long-handled brushes, bone-handled combs, pearl pins, and several mystery instruments that look vaguely threatening. Preparation, she says softly, is how we fool the nobility into thinking we're invisible. And yes, you do notice the powdered wig sitting on the corner shelf, wearing a tiny velvet tricorn hat, with what appears to be a taxidermied mouse perched on top. You don't ask. Not yet. Styling begins not with scissors, but scent. Solange dips a linen cloth into the pomade and begins rubbing it gently into a curly gray peruke. The smell of lavender floods the room, chased quickly by an undertone of something feral. Sheep fat, unfortunately, doesn't hide easily, but clients love the sheen it gives, and it helps the powder cling. That's important. No one wants to lose their status, and nothing signals disgrace quite like visible scalp. A bell tinkles at the door. First client of the day. A marquis who insists on a touch of Roman triumph in his style, even though he's more soggy pudding than centurion. He removes his hat with the exaggerated care of someone who expects fanfare. "Good morning, Solange," he croons. "I trust the wind hasn't undone your genius." She smiles with professional flatness. "My genius uses extra pomades." As she works, you watch her fingers glide over curls like a pianist. She fluffs, pins, spritzes, and dusts with powder in swift, practiced gestures. She's not just building hair, she's building identity. In this world, wigs aren't accessories. They're armor. They indicate wealth, politics, virtue, or the lack thereof. Even the amount of powder can suggest allegiances. Too much, you're royalist. Too little, Republican sympathies, perhaps. Historians still argue whether powdering habits in salons like this contributed to political profiling during the turbulent years ahead. You glance again at the tools. One ivory comb has a carved compartment in its handle, perfect for slipping in a note or maybe a key. Another stylist, Jean, once hid a love letter inside a hollow curl and accidentally shipped it to the wrong duke. He proposed to the sender anyway. Love is strange. A second client arrives, a merchant's wife with coin to burn and zero patience. She wants something Pompadour-esque, but with more spirit. Solange raises an eyebrow so subtly you almost miss it. You learn quickly that stylists in this world are part artist, part therapist, part magician, and maybe, just maybe, part hostage between clients. Solange rubs her hands with a vinegar rinse to clean off the residue. You ask what happens to the old wigs. They get reboiled, she says, or resold. Or, if they were really awful, clients used to scrub the privy floor. That's probably a joke. Probably. You take one last deep inhale of powder and rosemary grease and try not to sneeze. Outside, the rain has started again, tapping gently against the warped windows. Inside, the candles burn low, casting halos around each mannequin head, each powdered curl, each tool of transformation. You're just getting started. You're still rubbing the pomade smell from your sleeves as the workshop door swings open again this time. It's not nobility, but someone from the merchant class. A bootmaker's daughter, judging by the faint scent of leather and pride. Her gown is neat but modest, her bonnet held politely in both hands, and she wears that hopeful, anxious expression you'll come to recognize over the next few weeks. It's the look of someone who's saved up for one really good wig appointment. Possibly two if they skip dinners. Solange gives her the once-over. and gestures toward the lower styling chair, not the high-backed one reserved for nobility. "What the occasion?" she asks, gently, already reaching for a neutral-toned hairpiece. "A fete at the Delaroche estate," the girl says, voice tight with nerves. "There might be a banker's nephew there." You try not to smirk. Everyone wants to marry up, and in this world, a well-fitted wig might be the only ladder available. Solange chooses a demure auburn cascade, nothing too flashy, and starts combing it out with small strokes. You're surprised by how delicate the strands are. No wire or stuffing here, just real hair, probably sourced from some peasant girl in the countryside who got 3 coins for it and never asked what it would become. Wigs, you're beginning to understand, our social shapeshift. Before the poor or the aspiring, they represent transformation. For the middle class, respectability. For the upper crust, their currencies, signaling rank, affiliations, even personal philosophy. You think back to the Marquis from earlier and his Roman triumph wig. That wasn't a style choice. It was a proclamation. He wanted everyone to know that he admired classical virtues even if he personally had none. As the bootmaker's daughter talks about the party, you learn that there's a wig for every rung of the ladder. The noble women favor powdered white, thick with starch and status. Young debutantes like soft curls pinned with silk flowers. Older merchants often choose simple waves dyed to match whatever modest natural hair they have left. And for the clergy, tight, short perukes, modest, dull. Virtue never looked so itchy. Etienne appears from the back room, arms full of hat boxes. "Delivery from Madame Lemoyne," he announces, voice cracking on the name. Apparently, he's nursing a hopeless crush on the famous courtesan who only ever orders crimson-tinged wigs with little glass beads sewn into the roots. Her wigs are works of art and whispered sin. Solange sets the bootmaker's daughter under the powder bellelage, upside-down domes suspended by ropes and pulleys. With one tug, it envelops the girl's head, and a gentle cloud of scented starch rains down. It's like watching a holy relic be consecrated. She emerges pale as porcelain, trembling slightly, and with a smile that could melt at least one banker's nephew. You don't say it out loud, but she looks like she belongs in a painting now. And then your next client arrives. A stocky man with rings on every finger and a waistcoat stitched in emerald green. A merchant, clearly, but one who fancies himself important. Something grand, he demands, but not too showy. "I'm meeting with a notary and don't want to appear desperate." Solange nods slowly, then turns to you. "Fetch the don." You rifle through the stacked shelves of styled wigs until you find it. A voluminous brown monstrosity with tight spirals and a velvet ribbon, heavy as a melon and twice as fussy. You carry it like it might bite as she styles. Solange murmurs to you that this particular man comes in every 2 weeks. Always requesting something different, always dropping hints about debts he's trying to avoid. "Wigs," she says with a sigh, "make liars of us all." You ask about the cost. How much does a single style session run? Solange grins without humor. For him, 8 levers. For that girl, earlier, 3. For a duchess. Depends on how badly she wants to outdo her sister. Hair in this world is less about looks and more about theater. Historians still argue whether the 18th century obsession with wigs was about vanity, hygiene, or sheer social survival. The truth, as usual, is probably all of the above. In the back corner of the shop, you spot a small drawer labeled emergency. You lift the lid and peer inside. Extra pins, a phial of perfume, spare curls, and a tiny flask labeled courage. You don't ask what's in it. Some things are better left mysterious. Jean, the other stylist, pauses in her work to file a note into the ledger. 2 new orders from Saint Denis, she mutters. One wants a bishop's curl, the other a widow's roll. Can't imagine why. Solange leans over. The widow's probably trying to seduce the bishop. And they both laugh, a low conspiratorial chuckle like the rustling of silk skirts in a confession booth. You sit on a stool near the fire, watching as the last curls are pinned into place. The powder floats like mist, catching the flicker of the flames. You can see now that every style, every ringlet and twist and ribbon tells a story, a social position, a secret ambition, a desire to disappear or to be seen from across the room and whispered about long after the candles burn out, as the merchant preens before the mirror and adjusts his cravat. You glance around at the walls, framed sketches of past designs, yellowed with time, a pinned-up poem titled Ode to a Curl, a list of banned phrases, including Make It Look Natural, because nothing here is natural. That's the point. The rain has turned to a fine mist, gently coating the window panes in a sleepy blur. But inside the wig atelier, the day is heating up. Solange wipes her hands on her apron, then gestures for Etienne to light the backroom candles. You follow the flickering glow through a low archway and into the private quarters-part storage, part makeshift break room, and, as you quickly discover, part intelligence gathering den. This, as Solange whispers, is where the real work begins. You meet Camille, another apprentice stylist, who's been quietly cataloging something in a leather-bound journal. Her day job is curling hair and preparing ribbon sample, but after hours, or rather during certain appointments, she has another role, listening, not eavesdropping exactly, but more strategically overhearing. You perch on a dusty stool as she tells you about last week's client, a countess who got a little too loose-lipped after the powder bell. She mentioned debts, a trip to Austria, and someone named Henry who knows too much, Camille says, shrugging. It's amazing what people will say when you're behind them with a hairpin. Wig stylists, you learn, are privy to all kinds of secrets. Political, romantic, financial. When you've got your fingers in someone's scalp, their guard tends to drop. And in 18th century Paris, where alliances shift like wind-blown powder, stylists like Camille and Solange often found themselves in the peculiar position of confidant, and sometimes informant. You chuckle nervously, and Camille grins. Relax. You don't know enough to be dangerous. There's an old joke on the Rue des Coiffeurs. If you want to know who's planning a duel, ask their wig maker. And it's not just idle gossip. During times of unrest, especially in the years leading up to the revolution, many wig ateliers were quietly used to pass messages. Historians still argue whether a certain letter smuggled inside a powdered coiffure helped spark the downfall of a key nobleman. One version of the tale says it was hidden in a hollow braid. Another claims it was tucked under a velvet bow. Yet another insists there was no letter at all, just very poor decisions and a dramatic sneeze. You poke around Camille's journal. It's a mess of sketches, notes, coded initials, and what may or may not be a recipe for vermin repellent. She slams it shut gently and offers you a plum from her pocket. We don't get paid for this, she says, but it keeps things interesting. Solange pops in and drops a bundle of curls onto the workbench. Speaking of interesting, we've got the Abbé this afternoon. You blink, is that good? She snorts. It's a challenge. He wants to look holy, but also distinguished. Last time I gave him too much volume and he looked like a blessed peacock. The Abbé arrives precisely at noon, with damp cuffs and an expression like he's smelled something disagreeable, probably Etienne. Solange welcomes him with her most soothing tone, while Camille excuses herself to fetch powder, which you suspect is code for listen from the hall. The Abbé insists on a style befitting a servant of God, but attractive to those who may one day contribute to the cathedral fund. Translation: pious, but flirty. You help Solange prepare the work table. The wig selected is understated, soft, with gentle waves and a lace-edged base. She spritzes it with a hint of rose water, just enough to suggest holiness without indulgence. As Solange works, the Abbé begins to talk and talk and talk about the bishop's gout, the cardinal's questionable niece, a book that may or may not be banned, but certainly is scandalous. You realize somewhere between heretic shoemakers buys an imported incense that he's performing for you. He knows he's being watched, or maybe he just likes the sound of his own voice. Either way, Camille's ears are likely catching every syllable from the hallway. Solange finishes the styling with a soft dusting of neutral-toned powder. The Abbé admires himself in the mirror, then slips a coin under a ceramic pig by the till. For the church, he says. You doubt that Dot, after he leaves, Solange groans and rubs her temples. If he's holy, I'm a baroness. Etienne appears with a tray of stale biscuits. You accept one out of politeness and nearly chip a tooth's. We get them from the bakery when they're closing, he explains. 2 days later, they're perfect for dunking or fencing. Back in the main room, Camille's returned and is discreetly updating her notes. You wonder aloud if any of this ever becomes dangerous. She looks up, serious now. It can be. Once, a client asked for a hollow wig to carry something. Didn't say what. Solange refused. You glance at Solange, who shrugs. I like hair, but I don't like politics. and yet politics always seem to find their way in. A passing courier drops off a folded note addressed to Madame S. with no other markings. Solange tucks it into her sleeve without breaking rhythm as she rolls a curl dot. No one speaks of it. Later, as the light fades and the last client exits, you help clean up. Powder dust clings to every surface. Combs soak in a basin. The scent of pomade has worked its way into your very soul. And somewhere in this strange little salon, secrets continue to nestle quietly among the ringlets. You're learning that in this city, style isn't just fashionette's camouflage. And those who style others, they walk a delicate line between invisibility and omniscience. By the time the sun dips behind the chimneys, casting long slivers of lavender light across the tiled floor, you've been swept into a rhythm. Sweep, pin, powder, eavesdrop, repeat. The tools of the trade have become second nature. You now instinctively sort your pomades lavender for elegance, clove for mystery, rosemary for the particularly sweaty type sand. Your fingers dance along the loops of ribbon and wire like a piano player. Tonight, a different sort of client. Bisou. Solange gives you a heads up as she adjusts her cuffs. Madame Rousseau, she whispers. Aristocrat, divorcee, a regular ... and a nightmare. The name sends a ripple through the staff. Camille promptly disappears into the back. Etienne, who was balancing a tray of curlers, suddenly remembers a chore in the cellar. You're left beside Solange when the door creaks open and Madame Rousseau enters like a storm in silk. She's tall, angular, and wrapped in fox fur even, though it's June. Her cheeks are powdered into oblivion, and her earrings swing like pendulums when she speaks. "We shall not be late tonight," she says, sitting without waiting to be invited. There, a soiree at the Montcourts. I must look untouchable. Solange nods like she's dealing with a duchess and not a woman who once slapped by a footman for sneezing. You begin brushing out a newly cleaned hairpiece while Solange prepares her tools. The style chosen tonight is a gravity-defying spiral tower, supported by a lightweight cage and anchored with pearl-tipped pins. You can see the faint scars on Madame's temples' ears of tight coiffures pulled to snug, but pain means prestige. She never complains, except to say, "Higher." You glance at the magazine tucked under her elbow. It's not a periodical, those are for the bourgeois. This is something closer to a style catalogue, produced by an elite underground circle of wig designers who are always just ahead of the court. The latest trend. Miniature ships, no, really full model galleons, balanced on the scalp sails, unfurling like gossip. Solange rolls her eyes. She asks for one next month. Historians still argue whether this was satire or sincerity. Did noble women really wear ships in their wigs? Did stylists actually anchor fruit bowls and bird cages atop their clients' heads? Or were the illustrations found scrawled in journals and tucked in museum archives just exaggerations by the working class, poking fun at the nobility's sky-high vanity? Here's what's real. The base structures were wire and linen. The hair reel or false was molded around these forms with a mix of pomade, starch, and the occasional hidden pin. Scents were added to mask the inevitable decay. And yes, some wigs included mechanical pieces that moved small fans, even flapping wings. You nearly drop your comb when you hear Madame Rousseau say, "I want feathers." Ostrich, if you have them. Something that says, "I don't answer to anyone." Solange murmurs something affirming while silently motioning for you to grab the feather box. You find it tucked behind a wall panel. This, too, is part of the trade. A secret drawer for secret plumage. The styling process takes nearly an hour. There's a rhythm to it now. You pin. Solange twists. Madame Rousseau glares at her reflection with the intensity of a woman trying to seduce and destroy Paris in the same evening. "You know," she says, to no one in particular, "when I divorced my husband, he told everyone I was barren. I told them he was poor. Guess who's been invited to Versailles 3 times this year?" Beyond not sure whether to applaud or flinch. By the time her wig is complete, it stands nearly half a meter tall, powdered like the Alps, ringed in gold-dusted lace, and nodding gently as she shifts in her chair. It looks ... expensive, dangerous, like it could block a draft and start a war in the same breath as she stands to leave. She presses a coin into Solange's palm, whispers something too quiet to hear, and disappears into the night with her train trailing behind her like an accusation. The silence she leaves behind is immense. Etienne creeps back from the cellar. "Is she gone?" he asks. Camille reappears from the hall, nibbling a biscuit. Everyone relaxes. So Lange opens her hand and reveals the coin. Not gold, but silver ordinary, really, but tied with a red ribbon. A sign. Camille exhales slowly. She wants something next time. Something, it turns out, is code for, well, it depends. Sometimes it's a special design. Sometimes it's news passed quietly in hairpins. Sometimes it's a favor no one wants to name. You're beginning to realize how few requests in this salon are actually about hair. The shop closes early, just as a drizzle begins to patter softly against the shutters. Solange locks the door behind her, and the sound is ceremonial. You help extinguish the lamps, each one snuffed with a gentle hiss and the scent of wax and lavender. The room, now dim, is bathed in the ghostly shimmer of moonlight catching on glass cones and discarded pins. You feel tired, but not in the ordinary way. More like a sponge that's absorbed too many whispered stories. Too much rose-scented ambition. As you rinse the final brushes in the wash basin, Solange appears beside you. "You're doing well," she says. Most new hands flinch when they see blood. You freeze. Blood. She smirks. "Don't worry. Just a metaphor, mostly." You both laugh quietly, and for a moment, the weight of Madame Rousseau's towering wig feels lighter, almost funny. Almost the following morning, Paris is painted in soft fog, and your hands still smell faintly of bergamot and starch. You arrive before sunrise. boots tapping softly on the cobbled Rue de Petitchamps, and push open the salon's creaky door just as Etienne is lighting the sconces. "You're early," he says, raising an eyebrow. "Eager or cursed?" You shrug. "Maybe both." Today's first client arrives, bundled in a cloak of navy wool, face hidden beneath a Valen unusual touch for this part of town. She's announced simply as Mademoiselle Newell, and her posture radiates practiced secrecy. Solange barely reacts. She's seen worse. You're instructed to bring out the special tray. This one doesn't hold ribbons or perfumes. It holds masks, modest veils, hairpieces in subtle shades colors that say, "I am someone else." You soon realize this isn't about fashion. This is disguise. Newell's voice is low and even, but her eyes betray nerves. She declines powder. She requests no scent. You and Solange work in silence, crafting a modest chignon with a fringe of natural curls, something that wouldn't turn heads in any arrondissement. It's wig dash as dash invisibility dash cloak. As you pass pins to Solange, you learn from her tiny nods and unspoken cues that this woman is likely heading somewhere she shouldn't be. A clandestine salon, a forbidden lover, a royal chapel closed to the public. Could be any or all. Historians still argue whether wig ateliers like this one were unofficial arms of Paris's underground resistance. It's true that revolutionaries sometimes used stylists as go-betweens. Who else could move freely through noble circles without raising suspicion? There are tales of stylists delivering messages inside hollow pomade pots, and even smuggling contraband within false scalps. You wonder briefly if the curls you just wrapped are sheltering secrets. Newell thanks you both with a brief nod, then disappears into the morning fog, swallowed by mist and possibility. Camille appears beside you with a steaming mug of chicory brew and says, "That one's either a poet or an assassin." Before you can guess which, the door swings open again, this time for a much more familiar figure. Bernard, the baker's cousin and the salon's most indecisive client. Bernard arrives monthly for a refresh of what he calls his air de noblesse, though he's more meringue than Marquise. He wants curls like Lafayette, but not too military. Height like the king's cousin, but with less effort. And powder lots of it, but not the kind that makes him sneeze. It's a delicate balance, he says, as you wrap the curling rods. Solange lets you take the lead this time. You style. You pin, you dust, you fuss. Bernard chats away, utterly unaware that the current topic of gossip is neighbors' suspiciously well-fed catis being mentally archived by Camille in the corner. There's a strange comfort in Bernard's ridiculousness. He doesn't carry coded messages. He doesn't want disguises or double lives. He just wants to look like he has a distant relative with a title and an estate. In a world where fashion can hide spies, seduce dukes, and ignite rebellion, Bernard Bai is the rare client who simply wants to be liked. You take extra care with the placement of his side curls. You even tuck in a bit of blue ribbon just to match the embroidery on his vest. When he sees the final result, his expression is pure delight. This, he says, is what heaven must feel like. He tips generously. You're not sure whether it's gratitude or guilt. Either way, you pocket the coin and return to the basin. By mid-morning, the salon is full. A magistrate's daughter who accidentally dyed her fringe green. A seamstress who needs to look 6 years younger by sundown. Be visiting diplomat's wife who demands curls that look like clouds, but sexier. Every head of hair is a puzzle. Every style is a negotiation between vanity, status, and what will physically stay upright for more than 3 hours. You work quietly, listening to Solange talk about the importance of head shape, chin lines, and how one must always account for wind. Yes, wind, she says, the silent saboteur of the perfect coiffure. Camille chimes in with a half-joke. One strong gust, and the entire Versailles front row turns into a haystack. There's laughter, and for a moment, the salon feels like an island of absurdity floating in a city brimming with tension. Later, when the last client has left and the floors are swept clean of powder, Solange shows you a curious device tucked into a drawer near the back. A metal skull cap with little screws and latches. Wig clamp, she says. Used it once to build a wig for the Duchess of Artois. Thing had a porcelain dove that flapped its wings when she bowed. You stare at the contraption like it might bite. Did it work? Solange shrugs. For 5 minutes. Then the dove caught fire. She says this so casually you can't tell whether she's joking. That night, Camille brings out an old scrapbook one passed down by her predecessor. It's full of sketches, notes, and strange symbols. Some pages show wig diagrams. Others appear to be decoding guides. One page lists clients not by name, but by scent preference and preferred direction of curl. It's how we remember, she says. Clients lie. Curls don't. You ask if the book ever leaves the shop. Camille shakes her head. If it burns, it burns. Better than letting it fall into the wrong hands. You glance around the salon. To a stranger, it's just a place of ribbons and pins. But to you now, it's a vault of whispered truths and unspoken histories, some powdered, some perfumed, all tangled in hair. And as the candles burn low and the windows fog with evening chill, you finally understand. This isn't just styling. This is theater. This is subterfuge. This is survival. The week wears on, and with every passing day, you begin to move through the salon like a second self. You sweep pins into your palm without looking, blend scents by memory, and trim lace. Tell you how to, with the precision of a surgeon. The walls of the atelier have begun to hum in your ears, not with sound exactly, but with routine powder falls. Scissors snip, secrets rustle beneath satin. It's Friday, which means one thing: military wigs. Once a week, a small delegation of middle-ranking officers arrives with an alarming amount of confidence and truly no sense of proportion. They file in like crows, each hoping for something sharp, bold, and masculine, yet still fashionable enough to intimidate at dinner. You've learned that their demands often conflict. The first officer this morning is Captain Dufert, a man who smells strongly of tobacco and insists on something Greco-Roman. But for battle, you know better than to question this. Solange raises an eyebrow at you and lets you take the lead. You start by combing his natural hair thinning, brittle and uncooperative. Over it, you fit a wig cap and begin constructing a look that somehow combines curls, symmetry, and intimidation. You settle on a style with tight side rolls and a modest queue at the back, powdered lightly with charcoal grey. Duffet preens in the mirror. Very Athenian general meets musketeer, he declares. Exactly what I pictured. Historians still argue whether military men of the 18th century truly embraced fashion or merely endured it. Some memoirs show generals fussing over sideburn height like debutantes, while others claim officers privately despised the ritual, calling wigs powdered prisons. Yet portraits from the era don't lie some of those curls could hold court. The truth likely falls somewhere in the middle. Even warriors crave a little pageantry. And as you anchor the final curl behind Duffet's ear, you're reminded that looking important is sometimes half the battle. The next client is younger. Lieutenant Maryland. His ambitions are bigger than his rank. Make me look like I command artillery, he says, puffing out his chest. Solange snorts. You barely command your mustache. He ignores her. I need height, he says. Volume, gravitas. You build his wig taller, layered in steps like a fortress tower. A little absurd, yes, but exactly what he wants. You tuck a sprig of dried rosemary into the back as a final flourish. He doesn't notice. He leaves beaming. When the soldiers depart, they leave behind a small trail of gunpowder residue and military gossip. Camille pretends not to listen, but you can see her scribbling their words into her notebook, little quotes filed away for amusement, or blackmail, or both. By midday, the salon receives an unexpected visitor, a courier in royal livery. He presents besealed parchment to Solange, bows, and leaves without a word. Solange reads it, then folds it once, and sets it on the table. The Duchesse de Montreuil's, she says quietly. She wants a house visit. A hush falls over the room. This is no ordinary client. The Duchess is known for her wealth, her influence, and her terrifying pet peacock named Voltaire. She rarely leaves her estate, and even more rarely allows commoners into it. House visits are rare, dangerous. Even stylists have vanished during such assignments, shun afoul of a noble's mood, or stumbled on a family scandal, or simply said the wrong thing near the wrong maid. Still, Solange accepts. You're surprised when she picks you to accompany her. You've got quiet hands, she explains. That's what they want. You gather the travel kit, a folding mirror, small brushes, wire forms, 3 powdered wigs, 2 of differing heights, and a vial of amber pomander, kind that smells like burnt oranges and costs more than a dress. You travel by carriage through winding roads to the Duchess's estate, a sprawling manor fringed by fog and ivy. Inside, the staff greet you with the wariness of people trained not to speak unless screamed at. But Duchess is waiting in a domed chamber filled with mirrors. She wears a robe of black velvet and sits like a statue beneath a chandelier that looks like a frozen explosion. Voltaire, the peacock, perches on a screen nearby, watching you with suspicious eyes. Solange kneels. You follow suit. The Duchess waves her hand without looking. Begin. You work silently. The hairpiece she's chosen is pale lavender, ringed in a delicate garland of silk roses. It's stunning and heavy. As you pin it into place, you notice a faint scar at her temple lobe, healed, and likely from a fall, or perhaps something less accidental. I've heard, she says, voice low, that stylists often know more than priests. Solange doesn't answer, neither do you. You hear the whispers, who marries, who cheats, who rebels. There's a long pause. Then the Duchess sighs. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if all those secrets rose up. You finish pinning the final lock of hair. She studies herself in the mirror. Then, without warning, she says, "You'll return next week." Not a request, an order. Solange bows again. "Of course, Your Grace." Back in the carriage, you can finally breathe. You ask her what just happened. Solange shrugs. "We just became part of her household circle. That's good and bad." You return to the salon by sunset. The others are waiting, curious, perhaps afraid. Camille asks what the Duchess wore. Etienne wants to know about the peacock. You answer softly, but your thoughts drift back to that scar. That night, as you soak your hands in lavender water, you think about the strange intimacy of your job. How many people let strangers touch their heads, style their secrets, dress their vanities? You used to think hair was just hair, but now you know better. It's a story, a signal, a shield, and you, humble stylist in a back-alley Parisian salon, are one of the few entrusted to sculpt it. The scent of sandalwood and starch clings to your apron as the salon doors swing open, once again letting in a rush of early spring, air-and with it. Your most complicated client yet, Madame Biron. Biron is a social climber with the subtlety of a cannonball. She enters like she owns the street outside, brushing past Camille, who barely conceals her grimace. Veron always arrives with two goals: outdo every other woman at the theater, and make her husband's mistress weep with jealousy. Today, she demands something new. "Everyone's wearing height," she sniffs. "I want length, drama, something serpentine." You suppress a sigh. Serpentine isn't a hair, Tippet's a riddle. Solange nods slowly, as though decoding a message. "We'll need the copper rods," she says, already reaching for the curling irons you hoped not to see again today. "And the green powder, that's new." You learn that it's a rare, silvery green mineral blend, used only for high-profile events. It glints faintly under candlelight, and was banned from churches for distracting the congregation. You mix it with starch, while Solange sketches an idea. Long curls woven like vines, wrapped in thin threads of gold, with a central twist down the back like a snake's spine. It's dramatic, all right. As you start heating the rods, Camille mutters, May as well charge her for emotional labor, too. You work through the afternoon. Varen sits motionless, which is rare. Her eyes flit toward the mirror every few seconds, watching as the design forms, loops curling toward the sky, spirals trailing down like green ivy. Once, she almost smiles. Historians still argue whether clients like Varen drove hair fashion forward or simply drained stylists' sanity. Some scholars insist the innovations of 18th century Parisian hair came not from aristocrats or salons, but from women like her, ruthless, ambitious, never satisfied. Others claim stylists themselves steered the trends, using the clients as mannequins for their hidden genius. Either way, the result sits in your chair, staring proudly into her reflection. When Varen finally leaves after 4 hours, 6 complaints, and 2 I'll know when I see it, moments you feel like you've just survived a small war. Solange pours you a shot of violet cordial and says, "You did well." She didn't cry, which is rare. Evening settles in, and the salon quiets. Etienne is oiling the scissors. Camille is copying Varen's serpentine design into the sketchbook, muttering about weaponized hairstyles. You're cleaning up the green powder, still glinting faintly on the floorboards. Then, a strange knock. Not the hurried tap of a client running late, or the polite rapping of a courier. This one's deliberate 3 quick knocks, pause, then 2 more. Solange freezes. She goes to the door, doesn't open it fully. A slip of parchment is passed through the crack. She reads it silently, folds it once, and turns to you. We're being summoned to the Hotel de Brienne. You blink. That's the Ministry of War that next morning. You arrive not at the ministry itself, but a side entrance flanked by sleepy guards who barely look at you. Inside, the air smells like ink and iron. You're led not to an office, but to a small room, with 2 chairs and a single mirror. Your client, a woman in a plain grey dress who introduces herself as Genevieve. No last name, no rank. She looks like someone's librarian, or maybe someone's shadow. She doesn't smile. This must be done quickly. It must not stand out. It must survive rain, wind, and close scrutiny. Not the usual client brief. You're not. Solange begins mixing a matte pomodeno gloss. No, powder. You choose a weak base that's snug, neutral, almost severe. Tight braids pull into a low knot, almost invisible under her hat. As you work, Genevieve talks quietly. I'll be attending 3 functions. 1 with merchants, 1 with nobles, 1 with foreign envoys. I must appear forgettable at all 3. Camille would faint from boredom, but you recognize what's really happening. This is a spy wig. Historians still argue how involved stylists were in espionage networks. The idea that salons acted as intelligence hubs has always been part rumor, part paranoia. But evidence exists. Coded appointments, wigs hiding microscrolls, stylists passing maps between hairpins. You tighten the braid slightly, then add a subtle toucher hidden clasp beneath the nape that opens with a twist. Solange watches without speaking. She understands. Genevieve glances in the mirror, then nods. It will do. She leaves without a thank you. Back at the salon, you and Solange sit for a moment in silence, drinking lukewarm tea. You feel the day in your bones. Your hands ache. Your head spins with green powder and shadow women. You think of your first Dave curls and ribbons, of nervous hands and hopeful pride. Now, you're crafting disguises for ghosts, styling envy into vines, anchoring trust with pins and starch. The city outside still bustles, unaware of the quiet revolutions happening beneath wigs. And just before closing, Camille emerges from the back room, holding a long-forgotten relic, a wig box labeled only with the name Florent. Inside is a wig that hasn't seen light in years, grey with lavender tips, styled into a careful spiral. His last work, Camille says, her voice soft. He was our senior stylist once, disappeared during the night of lanterns. Left only this. You brush the spiral with your fingers. It's flawless. You wonder if Florence styled for nobles or revolutionaries, or both. Maybe that's why he vanished. You close the box gently, set it back where it belongs, and dim the sconces. The day is done. The city sleeps beneath powdered facades, and tomorrow the wigs will rise again. Morning arrives wrapped in a warm fog, the kind that mutes the world just enough to make everything feel secret. You slip into the salon early, before even Solange arrives, and for a moment you're alone, in the quiet heartbeat of the atelier. Brushes lined like soldiers, powder jars still sealed tight, and the faint perfume of yesterday's ambitions lingering in the air. By midday, the salon is back to its usual rhythm. Etienne is sharpening combs. Camille is swearing at a delivery boy. Solange is inspecting lace trims like a jeweler weighing diamonds. And you're setting up for the day's most peculiar appointment, a wig rehearsal. Yes, a rehearsal. Because tonight, the Comédie Francaise is debuting a new play, and the leading actress, Mademoiselle Lucienne, refuses to perform until her wig has been tested under full emotional duress. She storms in at noon, sharp cheeks flushed, eyes wild with purpose. Today, she declares, we are doing death. I must look radiant while dying, not like I've had soup thrown on my head. You nod, radiantly dying. Understood. Her wig is a custom piece of chestnut brown with subtle ash blonde streaks, styled in soft falling curls that brush the collarbone and sway with every dramatic gasp. You fit it carefully, adjusting for stability, movement, and a little tragic bounce. She demands a full test, crying, fainting, yelling, collapsing. You watch her act out an entire death scene in front of the mirror, sobbing into a handkerchief while spinning in place. And somehow the wig holds. Historians still argue whether theatre wigs were more advanced than those worn by nobles. Some claim salons used actresses as laboratories for innovation, pushing the limits of style, weight, and illusion. Others insist performers had lower standards, cheaper materials, rushed fittings. But if Lucien's wig has anything to say, it's that drama requires engineering. After her rehearsal and a second death scene. Just to be sure, Lucien gives you a teary hug. This is more than hair, she whispers. It's who I am when I'm not me. Camille watches from across the room and mouths, "Help us." You break for lunch, sharing stale bread and goat cheese, while Solange tells a story about the time she had to style a wig for an elephant. A baron's gift to the queen, she says. Full powdered poof. The elephant sneezed. Took me a week to get the starch out of my eyebrows. The second half of the day belongs to the aristocrats. They arrive in clusters, cousins of counts, friends of marquises, daughters of lesser viscounts, who pretend they're daughters of dukes. Each one wants something never before seen, even though they bring in sketches copied from last month's gazettes. You work on a young woman named Odette, who insists on a wig shaped like a blooming flower. Not metaphorically, literally. The base is a tall cone. Around it you attach hand-stitched silk petals, each dyed in gradual shades of pink. You anchor them with invisible thread, layer by layer, until the wig opens upward like a morning rose. Powdered tips, hidden combs, tiny birds made of lace. It's breathtaking. It's ridiculous. It's Paris. Solange walks past and mutters, "That wig has a better social life than I do." The day continues with smaller dramas. A noblewoman panics because someone at Versailles copied her wig shape. A widower requests a discreet mourning piece in midnight grey. A boy barely 12 arrives with his tutor, practicing how to bow while you tighten his miniature curls, in between clients. Camille shows you her latest sketches, a wig that functions as a portable music box. For parties, she explains. The curls could turn gears, maybe play a minuet. You nod, smile, and pray she never tries to build it. By late afternoon, things calm. You're rinsing pins in rosewater when Etienne approaches. Solange wants us in the back. All of us. That rarely happens. You gather in the back room, where wigs not yet claimed rest, like ghost heads on wooden forms. Solange holds a small tin box. She opens it. Inside is a folded letter and a ring with a blood-red stone. It came with no name, she says. No sender, just instructions. She reads aloud. The message is short. A new era begins. We need eyes in every mirror. Send. Your most silent pair of hands. Midnight. Rue des Armes. Basement. You all stare at her. Even Camille is quiet. Solange meets your eyes. It's you. You don't know whether to feel honored or cursed. Camille mutters, "So, are we stylists or spies now?" "Both," Etienne says. "Apparently, you don't sleep that night. Instead, you pace your tiny room above the bakery, listening to carts clatter by, watching shadows stretch across your ceiling. You repack your kit 3 times, finally settling on the basics. Scissors, pins, compact powder, and a small blade hidden in a comb handle, just in case. Midnight comes quickly. You find Rue des Armza, narrow alley between two shuttered cafes. The basement door is hidden behind a coal chute. You knock 3 times, pause, then twice more. The door creaks open. Inside, darkness, darkness, damp stone, and the smell of candle wax. A man greets you without giving his name. He wears a plain wig and gloves. "We've been watching your work," he says. "Your hands, your loyalty, you're needed." He doesn't explain further, just hands you a new pouch plane, leather and heavier than expected. Inside, a powdered wig to sealed notes and a map. "Your job," he says, "is to make her look ordinary." You don't ask who, you just nod. You've always made people into who they need to be. A duchess into a queen, a playwright into a swan, a spy into a shadow. Now, it's your turn. You step out into the night with the leather pouch heavy against your side, the map crumpled slightly in your damp palm. The streets of Paris are mostly asleep, save for the odd flicker of a lantern in an upper window or the distant echo of boots on cobblestone. You walk quickly, not because you're afraid, but because you don't want to think too long about what you've just agreed to do. You follow the map through winding alleys and narrow streets until you arrive at a crumbling townhouse tucked between 2 newer facades, as though forgotten by time on purpose. The windows are boarded from the inside, the shutters nailed shut. A brass knocker shaped like a lion's head guards the door. You tap it lightly. It swings open on its own. Inside is quiet, too quiet. Dust hangs in the air like old perfume, and the walls smell faintly of lavender and mold. A woman sits at the table, cloaked her face in shadow. She says nothing, just gestures to the chair beside her. You sit. "I'm to be a widow," she says, and the accent is not Parisian. From the countryside, mourning, humble, visiting family, just in time for the Bastille celebrations. You nod slowly, already envisioning it. A simple wig, not quite neat, but not quite untidy. Respectable, but forgettable. Something designed to be seen and forgotten in the same breath. You ask to see her hair. She hesitates. Then, silently, she removes the scarf underneath. Her natural hair is cropped too short for any style but a fitted wig. Her scalp bears the faint trace of ink-cold writing, now mostly faded. A spy, or someone being hunted by spies. You begin your work using only the tools from the pouch. They gave you a graying hairpiece laced with faint lavender thread, a tin of dulling powder, a brush whose handle contains a paper-thin blade tucked beneath the bristles. Every movement feels heavier than usual, every adjustment like setting a chess piece in a silent match. Historians still argue whether stylists like you were merely tools or willing agents in the vast, silent war of secrets that crept through 18th century France. Some say you were victims of circumstance by shadowy groups with just enough charm and threat to keep you loyal. Others believe you were the ones who made it possible for people to vanish in plain sight. Maybe both are true, Dot. As you finish, the woman inspects herself in the mirror. "You've made me no one," she says softly. You bow your head. That was the assignment. She smiles just slightly and disappears up the back stairs without another word. Back at the salon, no one asks where you've been. Camille hands you tea and nods. Solange raises an eyebrow but says nothing. Etienne hums softly, cleaning combs as if it were just any morning. But things feel different. It's not just that you've styled someone for espionage. It's that you've learned how easily someone can vanish. How the right wig, the right face, the right posture can erase years of memory and leave behind only a whisper. The week unfolds with its usual demands. Powder orders arrive. Rich clients pout. One of Camille's new designs, a wig that stores smelling salts in a hidden compartment, gets rejected for being too medical. You keep your head down, but one day a package arrives, addressed only to you. No return name. Inside, a single ivory comb and a piece of cloth embroidered with the crest of the royal household. You hold it for a long time. Later, you overhear Solange speaking in hushed tones near the back. They're going to use her. She's not ready. She doesn't need to be. Another night, another knock. This time at your personal door, not the salon. A young boy delivers a message. You to report to the Tuileries Palace. Midnight. Use the side gate. Ask for Mademoiselle Remy. You pack quickly. You don't ask why. At the palace, a guard escorts you through labyrinthine halls until you arrive at a room lit by dozens of beeswaxed candles. The walls are silk and the windows are curtained with gold. And standing at the far end, in a velvet dressing gown, is the Queen herself, Marie Antoinette. She turns to you slowly, and for a moment, you forget to breathe. Her hair is unstyled, her face bare. She looks younger than you expected, and older, all at once. I'm told you know how to disguise a woman in mourning. She says, not as a joke. You nod, slowly. They're watching everyone, she says. Even me, especially me. You work in silence. Every movement is careful, deliberate. You powder her hair into soft, muted curls. Nothing dramatic. No feathers or ships or pastry towers. Just a woman, a mother. A queen who wants, for once, not to be seen, but as you pin the final curl into place, she says, they think we're all fools, but we remember everything, even the ones who touch our hair. You meet her eyes. She holds your gaze for just a moment longer than you expect, then leave the back door unlocked on your way out. You return to the salon just before dawn. Solange is waiting with strong coffee and a slice of sweet bread. So, she says gently, was it her? You nod. She sighs like she's exhaling a weight she's carried for a decade. Then it's begun. Outside, Paris stirs to life. Bread wagons roll. Windows creak open. By. The sky is the color of ash, and the air smells like something coming undone. Inside. You pick up your brush. The wigs still need styling. You arrive at the salon early the next morning, but Solange is already there, sitting at the long wooden table, throwing a hairnet with fingers that barely tremble. She doesn't look up when you enter, just says, "No royal gossip today. We're on a tight schedule. The Comtesse de Villiers is coming for a refit." You nod, but there's something electric in the air. Like everyone's pretending it's a normal day, but knows full well the clock has started ticking towards something loud. That morning, 3 clients cancel last minute. One writes to say she's fleeing to her countryside estate. Another claims she's fallen ill. The third doesn't give a reason, just sends a pouch of coins and a note reading, "Keep the deposit. I won't need it." Camille jokes. Maybe the wigs finally became sentient and are hunting their wearers. Etienne deadpans. Good. I trained them. But no one really laughs. The Comtesse arrives precisely at noon, wearing a wig nearly 3 feet tall and looking like a walking pastry tower dusted in icing sugar and white grief. She insists it needs more height to intimidate the foreign ambassadors. You help her out of it slowly, unpinning the base structure with the precision of a watchmaker. The wig is dense, with hidden support cushions, wires, and a small metal frame shaped like a harp. You wonder, not for the first time, how many concussions these women have endured for the sake of fashion. While Camille distracts her with swatches of ribbon, you reinforce the internal scaffolding. You add subtle curls to soften the line around, purr temples, and lightly dust the powder with crushed lavender to hide the scent of starch. It's exhausting work, but oddly comforting, like restoring a cathedral for a god no one prays to anymore. Historians still argue about the architectural extremes of these wigs. Some claim they were statements of status, exaggerating the wearer's distance from common humanity. Others argue they were meant as satire comedic monuments to a society already eating itself alive. But there's also the theory that they were armored, not metal, but symbolic. Each inch added meant 1 inch further away from vulnerability. The Comtesse thanks you vaguely and floats out like a galleon in full sail. Her footman follows with a step stool. After she leaves, Solange closes the front doors and locks them. "No more walk-ins," she says. "Are we shutting down?" You ask. "No," she says. "We're fortified." That afternoon, you help move the most valuable Wigs Royal commissions. Competition winners, hairpieces with imported yak fibers, the cellar. The air downstairs is thick and damp, and the wigs look almost embarrassed to be stored somewhere so humble. Camille inventories, each one like a general counting troops. Solange pulls you aside. "We may need to pivot," she says. "Wigs are still important, but soon. Other disguises might be more vital." You glance toward the cellar. You think it'll come to that. She doesn't answer, just hands you a parcel. Inside, a pair of shears, 3 brown wigs in commoner styles, and a stitched leather roll containing fake birth certificates. "Practice," she says. "We'll need speed and silence." That evening, after the shutters, bar drawn, Etienne pulls out a bottle of plum wine someone gifted him 5 years ago and pours 4 small glasses. You all sit around the workshop table like it's a holiday. Clinking glasses quietly dot. Camille raises hers. 2 powdered lies. Etienne adds an unpowdered truths. You simply say, to staying visible only when we want to be. Later that week, something odd happens. You're sent a summons note from a noble, not from a theater, but from the Paris City Watch. A uniformed officer stands at the salon door, holding a folded letter sealed with wax. He doesn't speak, just hands it to Solange and disappears. She breaks the seal and reads it silently, then hands it to you. The city requests a demonstration, a wig that hides a message, a face that disappears into the crowd. You have 48 hours. Camille whistles. Well, that's vague. Etienne leans back in his chair. Or, it's a test. You spend that night experimenting. You design a wig with hollow curls that can carry a ribbon scrolled with text acid washed, so it dissolves in water. You practice blending features, light rouge that erases cheekbones, powder that narrows the jawline, curls that obscure the eyes without seeming untidy. You even create a detachable ponytail with a lockpick hidden inside the binding, just in case when the officials return 2 days later. They bring a decoy. They don't tell you who it is only, that you must change her appearance so she can cross the pond. Nerf, unrecognized, you do. By in 20 minutes flat. When she leaves, even Camille blinks in surprise. Did we just lose her in our own salon? That night, another letter arrives. This one is unsigned. Approved, be ready for more. The city is watching, and the wigs must lie. You've officially become part of something bigger than curls and pins. The wigs are no longer just fashion. They're camouflage, protest, performance. Solange says, we may be dressing the future now. You don't ask what she means. You're already imagining it. In your mind's eye, the Bastille cracking, the boulevards filled with song and dust, and in every crowd, 100 wigs each, one holding a secret. And behind one of them, always, will be you. You're standing in the back room, tying a ribbon through the curls of a modest brown wig, when Etienne bursts in holding a newspaper. His face is pale, which is impressive for a man usually powdered like a marble bust. He drops the paper on the table between you and Camille. It's today's edition of Le Courrier de Paris. The headline is simple, but loud. Nobility in disguise. Aristocrats flee Paris using commoners' wigs beneath it. A blurry, sketch-vaguely female, wearing a short-styled wig with an unmistakable Solange signature braid tucked into the back. Camille swears softly. You just stare. You flip through the article. It's not naming names yet, but it implies what you've all feared. Someone's talking, someone's watching, and your salon may be a little too famous for its own safety. You don't say anything, but your hands instinctively begin untangling a lock of synthetic curl. Nervous habit later that day. Solange gathers everyone in the rear courtyard, under the clotheslines, strung with drying linens, and a few wigs airing out in the sun. No more outsiders, she says. From now on, only vetted clients. Word, voth, only we burn the appointment book today. Etienne looks horrified. Put the ledger I've copied the useful bits, Solange replies. Everything else is a liability. You watch as Camille strikes a match and drops it into the metal bin, setting the elegant salon records ablaze. Dozens of names, titles, and hair colors curl into smoke, fluttering into the Paris air like ash from a forgotten century. The next few weeks blur. You style 3 noble women to look like tavern maids, complete with wine-stained aprons. One of them kisses your cheek on her way out, whispering, "You're the last kindness I'll remember of this city." You construct a powdered white wig, laced with thread dyed in revolutionary blue. The client wears it to an assembly rally and calls it subversive fashion. She returns with a black eye and a grin. You even alter a gendarme's wig so he can attend a private meeting dressed as a chimney sweep. He tips you in silver and says, "No one sees you, but you're everywhere." Historians still debate whether salons like yours were truly neutral, just artisans doing their jobs or quietly complicit in the social unraveling. Some argue you were revolutionaries in silk slippers. Others think you were opportunists. But no one can deny the strange position you held at the root of identity. In a world where appearances could literally save lives. Then comes the whisper, a name, La Jiva. You first hear it from a client who won't give her own name. She's wearing a scarf and claims to be mourning an uncle. When she leaves, Etienne asks, "Who's La Jiva?" You shrugged. The next day, a child drops off a letter written on blue paper. La Jiva wants a meeting. Midnight, old puppet theater en route. Day martyrs. Come alone. Camille insists you shouldn't go. Solange doesn't say anything. She just hands you a small blade hidden in a curling iron handle. The theater is a ruin burned, half down, years ago. Dust and soot coat the marionettes still dangling, prowl from the ceiling like sleepy ghosts. You arrive 5 minutes early. Someone is already there. A man in a plain coat and a simple brown wig. One of yours. He turns slowly. "You made me disappear once," he says. "Now I want you to help others." You realize with a jolt who he is, the Duke of Montereau, presumed dead for months. There were even rumors of a duel, a fire, an escape to Italy. "I'm La Jiva now," he says, "and we're building an exit network for those who don't believe in guillotines, but can't survive without change." You ask what he needs. He smiles. Wigs. 100 of them. Nondescript, durable, changeable, and quiet. You don't hesitate. You agree. Back at the salon, you draw up a plan. Camille sketches wig designs that can be flipped inside out. Etienne modifies bonnet linings to carry maps. You start mixing powders that fade with water. You even build a special stand for rapid styling, just in case you ever need to transform 10 people in a single hour. You don't sleep much, but oddly, you're at peace, because now you know your work isn't just for beauty or vanity. It's for survival, due for rebellion. For ghosts. One morning, a package arrives. No return name. Inside, a single white ribbon embroidered with a snowflake, and a list of names written in tiny, slanted script. You memorize it, then burn it in the hearth. That evening, as the sun sets over Paris, you stand at the window holding your shears and watching the light fall like powdered sugar over the rooftops. And you whisper to yourself, let them come. We're ready. A knock rattles the side door just before dawn. 3 quick taps, a pause, and then 2 more. The code you agreed on. You unlatch the door and let in a girl no older than 17. Her face is streaked with dust, her dress torn at the sleeve, and she's clutching a basket covered with a checkered cloth. No words. She just looks up at you, waiting. You nod and gesture her inside, beneath the clot. Not bread or fruit, but a hollowed-out wig stand. Inside the base, a scroll of names, neatly folded and tied with a single loop of blue thread. Etienne unfurls it, while Camille boils tea. 23 names. Some circled in ink, some crossed out. One name you recognize. An old client. The Duchess, who always insisted on lavender powder and wore a secret pendant of her dead brother. She's crossed out, you murmur. Camille says nothing, just pours another cup of tea. That morning, you begin preparing escape kits, not just wigs anymore. Full identities, glycerin makeup to blot out birthmarks, scar prosthetics, rouge recipes from old Italian stage manuals. You even repurpose horsehair, buy into moustaches for women trying to pass as male apprentices. The workshop becomes something between a forge and a church. Hushed, focused, precise. No time for idle gossip, no room for vanity. Only function and speed, and the growing sense that you're part of something invisible. Historians still debate whether the wig makers were truly central to the underground. Networks that blossomed in the late 1780s, their scant paper trail for obvious reasons. But traces remain. Hidden compartments in Hatbox's passport. Sketches with ink that matched known stylists' palettes. And survivors' letters praising a quiet woman with scissors who saved my life. Then one afternoon, Solange sits you all down. Her voice is softer than usual. I've been asked to disappear. The silence is so thick you could powder it. She explains she's being watched, that her name appeared on a list in the Ministry of the Interior, that Legiva has arranged for her to cross into Switzerland under a new name, new face, and a bonnet you'll style yourself. She smiles sadly. Apparently, my last wig will be for me. You spend the night building it. A grey blend, soft and short. Nothing noble, nothing memorable. Just clean, peasant-style curls that no one would look at twice. As you fit it on her the next morning. She touches your wrist. You're the new Solange now. She whispers, don't argue, just keep them safe. Then she's gone. Before breakfast, Camille swears and throws a hairbrush. Etienne retreats to the back and says he needs to clean the ash bins. Though you know it's just so no. One sees his face. You don't cry. You start reorganizing the ledgers. The salon moves on. The requests keep coming. Disappearances become normal. Clients come in through the alley now, using passcodes. The wigs become simpler, faster. No powdered towers, No feathered ships, just anonymity wrapped in hair. But once in a while, a strange client arrives. One day, a man dressed like a banker asks for something expressive but quiet. "What do you mean?" Camille asks. He shrugs. "I want to look like someone one suspects but still feel like myself." You give him a short, clean wig, muted brown, no flourishes. He pays with a coin stamped Republic francaise, a coin not yet officially minted. You keep it in a drawer. Then there's the woman who brings you a child and says, "Make us sisters." Her voice is trembling, but she never breaks eye contact. You craft identical plaits, tie them with the same faded blue ribbon, and send them out looking like peasant twins. Weeks later, you see the same child laughing in a market stall. Don't ask questions anymore. One afternoon, a letter arrives addressed to the seamstress of disguises. No signature, just one sentence. If the salons fall, Paris will forget its own face. It's poetic, maybe overly so, but it lingers. The city is changing again. Walls bear slogans. Markets trade in silence. The nobility is vanishing, not just in status, but in memory. Whole families erased, repainted as villains or martyrs. And through it all, you continue your work. Wigs, disguises, quiet reimaginings of lives. At night, the shop smells of starch and camp. The scissors never stop ringing. You hum old lullabies to yourself as you stitch hair onto mesh. Camille creates a storage system. Inside hatboxes, false bottoms, coded linings. Etienne experiments with wig glue infused with ink that stains fingers. 24-hour unidentifier. Only allies would know. You're no longer just crafting appearances. You're manufacturing myths. One day, a client arrives wearing one of your earliest creations, a massive, flower-stuffed monstrosity from the pre-crisis days. She's clearly out of step with the times. Everyone stares. You take her aside gently. "We don't do those anymore," you say. She looks crestfallen, but it made me feel ... present. You nod. "I understand. Let's build you something that makes you invisible." She cries as you cut it off. Historians often wonder what happened to the artistry in those years, where the creativity went. They say fashion died under the weight of revolution. But you know better. It just shifted. It learned to hide. And now, when you look at a blank wig cap, you don't see vanity. You see possibility. You wake to smoke not from fire, thankfully, but from the damp coal bricks someone has forgotten to vent properly. The air in the salon is thick and chalky, and your mouth tastes like ash and old starch. Camille's already up, sweeping cinders off the curling table, muttering something. Pit about this cursed city and its cursed stoves. Etienne appears moments later, carrying 3 loaves of bread and a sheet of newsprint wrapped around a lump of cheese. The headline catches your eye. Public Tribunal expands targets. Artists and artisans under suspicion. No list of names this time, but the tone is ominous. There's talk of tailors, Engravers, milliners, people who help the enemy escape by crafting lies of fabric and disguise. Your name isn't there yet, but you know what's coming. You start moving the most sensitive supplies into the false panel behind the salon's long mirror. Inside, you store your best tools, 2 weeks of rations, and a tiny scroll marked with read.sif houses mapped out by Legiva's network. If the raids begin, you'll burn the books, douse the powders, and vanish. Camille suggests making the salon look more like a funeral parlor. Drapes, black ribbons, silence, no music, no perfume. Etienne even swaps the sign out front with a plain wooden plank. Laundry and repairs. Still people come. They knock quietly. They speak in code. You build a wig for a violinist who hasn't played in months. His hands tremble as you trim the nape. He tells you he once played in the court orchestra. Now he dreams of playing in a tavern. Anonymously, you make him a pageboy wig, nondescript and friendly. He leaves with a small smile. Later, a note arrives. Played for 10 drunks. Best night of my life. You keep the note in your ledger. The world shrinks even more when the curfews hit. No one outside after sundown. No carriages. The sound of footsteps at night now means danger, not romance. And yet, in the stillness, something strange blooms. Trust. Clients you once saw as arrogant or aloof now arrive humbled. They ask, "Can I help?" They wash brushes, sweep floors. One man even sharpens your shears without being asked. Another woman, a former baroness, insists on scrubbing the back hallway. "We all owe you," she says simply. And then, one night, the rain comes. Not a drizzle, a storm. Torrents of water drumming the rooftops, leaking through the salon's old wooden seams, soaking wigs you'd left to dry. You scramble to save what you can, pressing bundles under eaves, wringing out strands like wet laundry. Camille curses as a powdered pompadour collapses in her hands. Etienne slips twice on the slick floor, smearing rouge down his shirt. You all laugh until your ribs ache. Later, huddled around a tea lamp, steaming in damp clothes, you admit something you've been afraid to say aloud. "I don't think we're just surviving anymore." Camille tilts her head. "Then what are we doing?" You hesitate, then say it. "We're remembering how to be human." Historians still argue whether communities like yours truly fostered resistance or merely adapted to it. But those who lived it speak differently. They speak of secret sanctuaries, of quiet rooms filled with old mirrors and soft brushes, of laughter echoing through fear. One woman, decades later, would write, "In a world gone mad, someone powdered my face and said I looked kind. That was enough to keep me going. That was you." You begin taking small risks again. You design a wig that includes a hidden clasp for carrying a sliver of silver. You reintroduce lavender oil, just a drop on the inside lining, reminding the wearer of gentler time. You craft mourning wigs that look dull outside but shimmer faintly in candlelight. Symbols of grief and resilience. Both. A client brings you a locket, inside to curls. Her twin sons, lost to the river 2 years ago. She asks you to weave. Pull the curls into a new wig. You do. It takes 3 hours. When you finish, she places it on her head like a crown and says, "Now they walk with me again." Your hands tremble when she leaves. You don't tell anyone why. The city beyond the shutters continues to twist and strain. Bread lines grow longer, celebrations quieter. But inside your walls, the work remains steady. By the end of the month, you've made 13 escape wigs, 5 theatrical disguises, 2 wedding styles, and 1 custom job for a man who simply wanted to look like the better version of myself. Camille says you've turned into a confessor. Etienne says you've become part priest, part spy. But you feel like a mother hen, tucking stories beneath your wings. Each wig is now a tiny rebellion, a shield, a whisper, a promise that no matter what face the world expects of you, you still have the right to choose your own. And as the rains dry and the cobblestones reappear beneath the sun, you stitch another name into your private journal. La Ziva sends you a bottle of ink and a new list. You're not done yet. The streets of Paris have quieted, but it's not Persit's exhaustion, a stillness that settles like dust in corners. People move slower now, eyes flicking side to side, scanning every shopfront, every whisper of fabric in the wind. The rhythm of the city has shifted again, and you like your wigs must adapt. One morning, a boy no older than 12 knocks at the salon door. He wears a coat far too large for him, sleeves rolled twice, and he doesn't speak. Just hands you a folded square of paper with a single charcoal drawing. A woman's face, hair curled tightly in a modest chignon. It's labeled only Maman. No note, no name. Just that you nod and let him in. Camille finds a cup of milk. Etienne offers a hard biscuit. You begin working from the sketch, measuring the boy's gaze as he watches, trying to rebuild someone he's lost. When it's finished, he presses the wig to his chest and leaves without a word. Historians still debate whether children were truly part of the information networks that crisscrossed revolutionary Paris. Some argue it's romanticized. Others insist they were essential, invisible, underestimated, and capable of disappearing into crowds with secrets tucked behind their ears. You choose to believe the second. Requests begin to change tone. Less panic, more purpose. Clients now ask for wigs that look official, not noble, not rich, but administrative, like minor clerks, market auditors, dock supervisors. You realize what they're really saying. They want to infiltrate. A young woman in patched boots brings you a crumpled list of ministry staff names. She points to one make me look like her, Camille Box. That's a government stenographer. She's by a foot too. So am I. You don't ask more. You pull out your file of lace fronts and begin sketching. The wigs now carry layers, appearance. Yes, but also intention. With each one, you feel yourself becoming less stylist and more alchemist, transmuting fear into strategy, ego into courage, memory into camouflage. Etienne jokes that your hands never stop moving. Even in your sleep, you reach for brushes. Camille leaves you sprigs of rosemary under your pillow. For your nerves, she says. You leave her slices of apple tucked in her sewing box. It's the little kindnesses that keep you human. The weather turns again hot this time, humid and sharp. Powder clumps, wake blue melts, tempers fray. A woman, Pia, arrives in tears. Her old wig, a flamboyant creation from Solange's last year, is ruined by the heat. It was the only thing that made me feel like myself, she sobs. You sit with her for a long while. Then, without a word, you cut the old wig into pieces, strip it of lace and ribbons, and rework it into a sleek, shorter style. You leave just one flourish, a single dyed feather, barely visible, tucked behind the left ear. She gasps when she sees it. Solange always said I had something left to say, she murmurs. Now I think I do. You add a new design to your book, Reclamation Cut, and you begin offering it quietly to others. Historians still argue whether the stylists of the revolution were artists or merely laborers. But you know better. Art best what survives. Labor is what carries it forward. You're both. The salon takes on a rhythm so natural you don't notice the change until one evening. You look up from a half-finished hairnet and realize Camille is singing. Soft, low and old. Lullaby about linden trees and forgetting. Etienne hums along as he brushes out a hairpiece. You join without meaning to, for the first time in months. No one mentions the tribunal later that week. You're visited by someone unexpected. The same wigmaker from the Rue Saint-Anna, who once mocked your sad little shop. She stands awkwardly in the doorway. I need your help, she says simply. You offer her tea. She doesn't refuse. Turns out her own workshop was raided 2 nights ago. Her apprentice disappeared. The ledger was burned. She saved only what she could carry in her corset. You don't gloat. You don't smile. You just give her Camille's old station and say, we start at dawn. She cries into your tea. As the days roll on, the salon swells with stories. Survivors, seekers, new allies. Someone brings in a strand of hair said to be from a fallen revolutionary, asking you to braid it into their own style. So I never forget who we lost. You do it. Carefully, the wig becomes a relic. And then, one evening, just as the lamplighters move down the street, a man in a tri-corner hat knocks. His coat is fine, but frayed at the sleeves. His shoes too polished. Something about him reads, careful. I've come to collect a favor, he says. You recognize him, barely. A Longo client. A man who once asked for a style that made me disappear. He lowers his voice. They're planning a raid on Thursday. You freeze. He continues. You've 3 nights. Then they come. You don't ask who they are. You don't ask why he told you. You just nod. That night, you, Camille, Etienne, and the Rue Saint-Honore woman sit together by lamplight. You make lists. You pack crates. You mark routes. And then, because it feels right, you all pour a little wine and toast silently. To wigs, to secrets, to keeping the city's soul stitched beneath lace and pins. You do not sleep that night. You've never packed a life so quickly. On the eve of the raid, the salon looks almost normal. Wigs on stands, scissors neatly aligned, powder jars closed tight. But every surface hides a plan. Every curl, every shelf, every crate tucked into corners and false compartments is a map of escape. You wear plain clothes, no scent, hair pulled back and unstyled. You look like a laundress, not an artist. Camille has done the same. Etienne has gone full disguised posture, soot on his cheek, a handkerchief tied round his jaw. A mute chimney sweep, he says with a wink. It shouldn't be funny, but it is. You light a single candle at the center table, and then one by one, blow out the rest. The salon goes quiet, still, then you wait. Historians still argue over whether the Thursday sweep, as it's now called, was meant as a cleansing of resistance circles, or a theatrical display of power. What they agree on is that more than 50 workshops, studios, and gathering places were stormed that night. Few arrests, no charges, just destruction. They came for yours around midnight. First, the boots, then the hammering knock. You do not answer. They break the door. Floodlights, rifles, shouting, "Buy!" on the floor. Hands visible. You obey. Etienne feigns terror, which comes easily under pressure. Camille stands frozen, eyes wide. The Rue Saint-Honore woman doesn't flinch. A man in a blue sash walks through your salon as if it were a brothel. He overturns wig stands, knocks over a tin of powder, steps deliberately on your combs. "No secrets here," he says with a sneer. You nod. "We just clean clothes." He picks up a half-finished wig, turns it in his hand, and mutters, "Too quiet here." He leaves with a warning. "Next time, we bring fire." You do not breathe until the last bootstep fades. You wait an hour before moving. Then, like clockwork, you and Camille begin uncovering the real salon. The false backs, the hidden trunks, the crates beneath floorboards, the wigs destined for other districts, the ledgers coded in lemon juice, the portraits drawn with coal on starch paper. Hope you survived, but survival has changed you. You no longer aim for secrecy alone. Till you want memory, a trace, a trail of powder and lace that says, "We were here and we mattered." You reopen the salon quietly. 3 days later, word spreads fast. People return. One client, who lost her husband in the Bastille riots, asks for a mourning. Wig laced with violets. Another, a former pastry chef, wants a style that mimics the swirl of a lemon tart. You say yes to both. And you begin leaving things behind. Not just wigs, but gestures. Hairpins tucked into books at bakeries. Powder samples under stone benches. A tiny braid pinned to a cathedral. Little reminders that style survives. Ligiva writes you again, just one line. The crown is broken, but the theater is full. You smile at that. Camille starts sketching wigs for children curls that look like ivy braids that mimic wild herbs. Etienne builds a miniature theater in the back room and fills it with puppets made from trimmed wig scraps. You let yourself dream, of peace, of a museum someday, where people can stand before a glass case and see a powdered pompadour and read, crafted by hand in resistance, kept the flame alive. Historians may still argue, but you know the truth. The wigs were never just wigs. They were masks, shields, altars, mirrors, stories. They were you. And as the world around you limps toward something new, not quite the old kingdom, not yet a republic, you'll thread another strand of silver hair into a lace front and think, we built beauty in the middle of ruin, and you'll do it again and again and again. Now, as the city sleeps, the shutters closed and the cobblestones soft with dew, you set your tools down for the night. The combs are quiet, the scissors still. A single candle flickers on the work table, its light trembling in the draught from the window left just slightly open. You move slowly now, breathing deep, your fingers loose, your back relaxing into the old wooden chair, worn smooth by years of leaning forward in care and concentration. The wigs sleep, two rows of delicate shapes, silent expressions, empty faces waiting to be filled again by someone's story. The storm has passed for now. You are safe here. The danger outside is distant, muffled. Here, inside these walls, there is only soft fabric and warm light, the hush of memory settling like powder on a shelf. You close your eyes and let the scent of lavender and starch carry you. You remember every curl you crafted, every tear wiped gently from a client's cheek, every whispered thank you pressed into your palm by someone just trying to feel like themselves again. You did good. You are enough. Let that warmth settle into. Put your chest. You are no longer hiding. You are resting. And so the night stretches out, tender and still. The city dreams, and you dream with it. Sleep, little stylist. Sleep, quiet maker of masks. The candle burns lower. The world can wait. You have earned your rest. End of script. Sweet dreams.